Before I get into today's episode, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been following this series and patiently waiting for the next part. I know it's been about a week since the last episode, and I want to explain why. The first reason is simple. This is hard. Reliving these experiences is emotionally exhausting. It's mentally draining. It's embarrassing. And if I'm being honest, the last episode was one of the hardest for me to record because it covered the physical violence, the fear, and ultimately the events that led to me leaving Washington while I was pregnant. Those are not easy memories to revisit. The second reason is that I'm doing all of this while being a full-time single mother who is actively present in her daughter's life. My daughter's involved in activities, we have family obligations, we have everyday life, and on top of that, I have to find the emotional capacity to process these experiences, organize my thoughts, write everything out, record it, edit it, and share it publicly along with the music. That takes time. So I genuinely appreciate everyone's patience, support, and understanding. And above all, I give all praises to Yahweh through his only begotten son, Yahweh Shai, for giving me the strength to continue telling this story, even when it's difficult. There have been many moments throughout this process where I felt overwhelmed, discouraged, or emotionally exhausted, but by the grace of Yahweh, I am still here and I am still moving forward. I also want to say something that I think has been a recurring theme throughout this entire series. For a very long time, I approached this marriage in good faith. I approached reconciliation in good faith. I approached counseling in good faith. I approached leadership in good faith. And even after everything that had happened, I continued giving people the opportunities to do the right thing in good faith. That doesn't mean I handled everything perfectly. It doesn't mean I never made mistakes, but it does mean that my intentions were not what some people are now trying to portray them as. I was not looking for a way out. I wasn't looking for a way to destroy someone. I wasn't looking for a public fight. I was trying to save my marriage, protect my family, and create a stable future for my daughter. Now, before I continue, I want to briefly address something that was recently said about me. One of the criticisms was that because I'm reading from notes or a prepared script that my story somehow isn't genuine. I honestly don't understand that reasoning. People write victim impact statements. People write affidavits. People prepare testimony before going to court. People journal about traumatic experiences because trauma isn't always easy to recall in a clear, organized way. For me, writing things down isn't about manufacturing a story. It's about making sure I tell it accurately and don't leave out important details. At the same time, I find it interesting that my carefully written account is treated with suspicion, while someone else's verbal assurances that they're doing the work, have changed, are readily accepted. From my perspective, credibility shouldn't depend on whether someone is reading from notes. It should depend on whether their words are consistent with their actions. I've also heard statements made about contact with my child and financial support that don't match my own experience. I can only speak to what I've personally lived and what I personally observed. And I want to make something else very clear. I'm not talking badly about someone. I am talking about my experience. There's a difference. If describing what happened reflects poorly on someone, that's not because I'm trying to damage their image. It's because actions have consequences and experiences have outcomes. Telling the truth about what I lived through is not bitterness, it's clarity. For a long time, silence protected other people far more than it protected me. And sometimes the truth sounds harsh only because people have become comfortable with not hearing it. I'm sharing my perspective and my lived experience as accurately as I know how. That's all I've ever tried to do.
Good faith. Didn't understand the silence. I didn't understand the weight. There were nights I cried so hard I could barely lift my face. But every door that closed behind me, every road that took too long. Looking back, I see your hand was there all along. Yeah. You were writing something greater than these eyes could ever see, working every broken piece into a masterpiece. When we couldn't see tomorrow, you were already there, holding every prayer, holding every tear. So we're walking good faith, even when we can't see the way, trusting every promise you have spoken over us. We'll stand in good faith through the sunshine and the rain, knowing all things work together for the ones who love your name. Good faith, good faith. We're walking by faith, not by sight. Yeah. You heard Hannah in her sorrow, you heard Esther when she stood. You gave Deborah courage when the battle wasn't good. You remembered every daughter, every prayer and every cry. You have never left your people, not a single time. When affliction tried to break us, when fear knocked at the door, you reminded us your spirit was made for so much more. When we couldn't see tomorrow, you were already there, holding every prayer, holding every tear. So we're walking good faith, even when we can't see the way, trusting every promise you have spoken over us. We'll stand in good faith through the sunshine and the rain, knowing all things work together for the ones who love your name. Good faith, good faith. We're walking by faith, not by sight. Can a mother forget her child? Even if she could, you never will. You saw the pain, saw the sacrifice. You saw every hidden battle, every sleepless night. You gave Ruth the future, you gave Esther a voice, and you still call your daughters to rejoice. No fear, only power from above. No fear, only purpose, only love. No fear, you have carried us this far. No fear, we're exactly where you are. We're walking good faith, even when we can't see the way, trusting every promise you have spoken over us. We'll stand by faith through the sunshine and the rain, knowing all things work together for the ones who love your name. Good faith. We'll keep your commandments and honor your name. Good faith. Through your house, we give you praise. Your thoughts are higher, your ways are higher, and every step we take is covered by good faith, good faith, good faith.
After I got back to California in March of 2024, I was trying to stabilize myself. I was trying to process what had happened in Washington. I was trying to survive the first trimester. I was around 9 weeks and back at my parents' house. Once I was in a safe environment, my pregnancy symptoms kicked in. I was sleeping all the time. Like my body and my mind were just so exhausted. I had developed really bad acne on my face. It almost looked like a rash. It finally went away about 2 weeks after being home. The living situation, the move, and the trip had taken a huge toll on me. But I was trying to protect my peace and protect my baby. My friends and family, pretty much everyone around me knew what I had been through, and they all wanted the same thing, for me to be safe. and for me to have a stress-free pregnancy. This was my first child, and things had already started out really badly. As for Deacon and I, for a while there was distance. We were not talking, and honestly, a part of me thought maybe distance would help. Maybe time would calm things down, and maybe once alcohol was not involved, maybe once emotions settled, maybe once the baby became more real, something could change. Then April came. When I found out at 12 weeks that I was having a girl, something shifted in me in a way I still cannot fully explain. Up until that point, I was dealing with everything from a survival standpoint. Leave Washington, get safe, get stable, stay healthy, and make it through the first trimester. But finding out I was having a daughter made everything real in a different way. It was not just about me anymore. I started thinking about her life, what she would grow up with, and what kind of future she would have. I grew up in a two-parent household. My parents are still together. I have a close relationship with my dad. So now I was pregnant, emotionally exhausted, physically drained, still traumatized by what had happened in February, and grieving something for my daughter that had not even happened yet. Leaving Washington did not mean I wanted to erase him from her life. Leaving meant I didn't feel safe, and those are two very different things. Despite everything, I still wanted my daughter to have her father. And I know some people may wonder, why would you want him around your daughter? The truth is, I was not trying to give my daughter an abusive father or teacher that this is what marriage and being a wife should look like. I did not want that for her. At the time, I was still hoping he would change, get help, and become better. I was wrong, but I didn't know that then, or maybe I didn't want to fully accept it yet. And as you can see in the comments on my videos, in this belief system, reconciliation is always pushed as the righteous option. Looking back now, I can see that I was grieving the family I wanted my daughter to have. So I reached out to him. And I want to be clear about that. I didn't reach out begging. I did not reach out apologizing for protecting myself. I did not reach out recanting what happened. I sent him the same pregnancy announcement that I sent my family. That was it. He called me, and immediately I could feel the dynamic had not changed. Instead of asking how I was doing, instead of asking about the baby, instead of acknowledging what happened, he went straight into guilt and control. You're supposed to be my wife. You're my possession. How could you go to the police on me? And that was the tone of our first real conversation after over a month of no contact. And what made it worse was what he said after that. He tried to justify himself while guilt tripping me at the same time. He told me he had worse altercations with another one of his wives, that he had been more physical than that before, that he had put his hands on her and even choked her out. But his issue was not what he did. His issue was that I called the police. He told me she had called him all kinds of names, had plenty of physical altercations, and she still never called the cops. But I did. So in his mind, the problem was not the abuse. The problem was that I did not stay quiet about it. And then just like that, he brought up the money again. He asked me about my workers' compensation settlement. Now, mind you, I had already learned my lesson with the tax refund situation. I had already been through him demanding money, cussing me out, breaking my door down, putting his hands on me, threatening my life, and prophesying that I was going to have a miscarriage. So I knew better. But I still told him I had received the check and had not deposited it yet because I didn't want it to interfere with my benefits, and I was basically saving it for a rainy day. From that moment on, everything became about that money once again. Every conversation, every follow up, every check in. It was not about me being pregnant. It was not about the baby. It was not about healing. It was about access. Now the tone shifted to him saying he wanted to reconcile. He said he wanted to be in the baby's life. He said we needed to move forward. And then he gave me three options. And those three options were not really options. It was either I come back, cut my family off, fully submit to him and do everything his way, or we stay separated on his terms where he controls everything and decides what I get, or I am completely on my own. He framed it as leaving the truth and remarrying. There was no option where I was safe, stable, respected, and supported, but I was still thinking about my daughter and the kind of relationship she might have with her father. So I tried. He told me he was going to come visit me the following week. He made it sound urgent. He said part of the reason he needed the money was so he could come see me, come see us, and start working things out. I didn't understand why he needed my money to come see me, especially since he had just gotten his tax return along with his two other wives' tax returns as well. But the message became clear. If I wanted to show a good faith effort towards reconciliation, I needed to do what my husband said and send the money. What I should have done was talk to someone else, someone that can help me through the mental space that I was in, wanting so desperately for my daughter to have a father that I myself fell back into a trap I had done so much to escape. I was embarrassed to even have the feelings I was having regarding reconciling after what he had said and done to me, after I asked for help to leave him. So that's why I kept those talks to myself in the beginning. But when these types of predators have you isolated, that's the best way for them to gain control over you. And that's exactly what happened. I kept it to myself and I let my emotions lead rather than logic. And after a few days of trying to push off sending the money and constant pressure from him, I sent it. And the moment I sent it, everything changed. For a moment, I had almost felt relieved. I thought maybe this was the beginning of reconciliation. I didn't realize I was repeating the same cycle. Because as soon as he confirmed the deposit, he said we needed a conference call with Chief and Sergeant Yatab, that they wanted to talk to me, and he wanted to confirm whether Chief thinks it's too early for us to be around each other or not. The main focus of the conversation was why I called the police. Why would I be so selfish as to try to get this man taken away from his wives and other children who needed him? That the least I could do to make an effort at reconciliation was send him that money. So, after explaining my side, I basically had to sit there and take backlash from everyone about what I should and shouldn't have done. I wanted to say so badly, why would I try to get him taken away from his family? He's the one who put his hands on me. But I shut down. I just wanted the conversation to be over because I didn't agree with anything that was being said. And of course, Chief followed Deacon's lead and said he agreed that it was too early for us to be around each other. So now the visit was not happening. Now we needed more time, more space, more counsel. It was the same pattern again. Something is promised, I follow through, and then the entire situation changes once he gets what he wants. So now I'm sitting there 13 weeks pregnant in California, having just sent this man money, and the plan that was used to justify it is gone. I'm asking him, okay, so what now? What are we actually doing? Why didn't we have this conversation before you asked for the money if you thought it was too early to come see me? You didn't want me to get sound advice about the decision from any of my family or friends, but you got both of your friends on the phone to supposedly help you decide what to do now that you got my money. Since you're not coming, I need you to send the money back. And we need to get counseling from a real elder immediately. And instead of clarity, instead of leadership, instead of consistency, I get this. That was his response. I have to pray. Whatever happens, happens. No plan, no structure, no reassurance, no accountability, nothing. Just, you have to do what your husband says. And at the same time, I'm telling him what this is doing to me physically. My heart rate is high. I'm anxious. I'm not sleeping. My body is reacting to the stress. I'm pregnant. And his response is basically indifference. That's when I started realizing something. I had done everything I said I was going to do. I reached out. I tried to reconcile. I agreed to counseling. I sent money. I communicated clearly. I moved completely in good faith. And on his end, nothing changed. And while all of this is happening, he was outside living his life, spending money, posting, going out, buying jewelry, buying clothes, having nights out. He even took the same wife he took to Topgolf to celebrate her birthday out to a waterfront dinner with my money and posted it to his story. And I'm looking at those pictures and videos like, so that's where my money went? That's where my workers' comp settlement went? Meanwhile, the wife that had recently been in a car accident was still driving around with 3 kids, including their 1-year-old daughter, in a car where the door barely closed. He didn't even use that money to help her. He didn't even use that money to help stabilize anything. He didn't even use that money on me. He used it on himself. At the same time, he was still calling me every day asking, "Did you find out if you have a case for personal injury? Have you called a lawyer? What do they say? How much do you think you're going to get? When are you going to know?" It was constant. It was pressure. It was obsession. Not with me, not with the baby, with money. I kept following up about counseling because if I didn't, it would never happen. I had found a way to get in contact with the elder Kahan, and in May, we were finally able to get counseling with him and his wife. I was actually feeling a sense of relief when I found out that we would be having weekly sessions and checking in on our progress each time, and maybe we could get somewhere. So we had counseling, and after the first session, they gave us homework. They told me to fast and pray, and they told him to go to AA, reduce drinking, and get counseling. They said that if he was uncomfortable going to AA, then he could have a one on one counseling session weekly with the elder to get down to the root of his drinking problem. He did none of it. He told them he had already put himself on a drinking order, which is what he always did. He says he won't buy alcohol, not that he won't drink it. Meanwhile, there are transactions coming in on Cash App where he's receiving $20 to $40 throughout the night with the memo as the name of the drinks. No one truly had any way of monitoring his drinking, and that's how he wanted it. So he would get upset whenever I would ask about how it was going. Instead of doing the homework, he said the elder and his wife were biased, and he refused to continue any further sessions. And we never even got to the financial part. I never got to talk about getting my money back. I had asked for it back so many times. At that point, he wouldn't find another elder to counsel with, wouldn't go back to Elder Kahan for counseling. Chief had already let us know he was not going to counsel us anymore, so I really felt like I had no one left to go to. It was getting hard for us to just have simple conversations and go about my normal day because I was so torn up about the fact he would not give me my money back. I really needed someone to talk to, so I went back to leadership again, this time to Captain Tazama. At the time, he was third in command within the organization. He was also the husband of my best friend, someone I consider a sister, and to be completely honest, people may wonder why I would seek advice from him at all. Looking back, I was compartmentalizing. There had already been issues in their marriage. There had already been domestic violence incidences that I was aware of and had personally witnessed, but in my own interactions with Captain, he had always been respectful towards me. In my mind, ironically, I separated those things. I had somehow convinced myself that whatever was happening in their marriage was their situation and whatever counsel he could offer me was separate. When you're inside of a system where certain men are viewed as spiritual authorities, you learn to believe that even flawed leaders can still provide godly counsel. More than anything, I was desperate. I had already gone through counseling. I had already asked for help. I had already tried addressing the issues directly. Nothing was changing. So even though Captain was lower ranking than Deacon, and I knew what happened between him and his wife, he was still leadership. He was also someone who knew Deacon very well and who Deacon considered a friend. So I believe Captain's advice carried weight. When I got on the phone with him and explained everything, the money, the counseling, the instability, the abuse, the constant pressure, I was genuinely looking for help. But the advice I received was essentially the same message I had already been hearing. I was told to let go of the money. I was told to focus on reconciliation. I was told to focus on being able to do what my husband instructed me to do. And once again, I was told that as a wife, I belonged to my husband, that what was mine was his. The message wasn't really different from what Deacon had been telling me all along. The difference was that Captain communicated it in a calmer, more polished way, which made it easier to accept at the time. Looking back now, one of the hardest realizations is understanding that some of the people I turned to for guidance were going through many of the same issues in their own homes. And that's when something started to click for me. This stopped feeling like a problem between only me and my husband. It started feeling like something much bigger. Because in these camps, there is no shortage of correction when it comes to certain people. People get counseled, people get suspended, people get publicly rebuked, people get removed. Sometimes people even pay for counseling. There's structure, there are rules, there is accountability. But from where I stood, when it came to certain leaders, the standards seemed different. When it came to Deacon, and in some cases other men in leadership, I was not seeing the same seriousness, the same correction, or the same consequences that I saw applied elsewhere. The more I observed, the harder it became to believe this was simply an isolated problem inside of my marriage. It started feeling like the system itself protected certain people. Because from where I stood, there seemed to be one standard for regular members and another standard when leadership was involved. And once I started seeing that pattern, I understood why nothing seemed to be changing. From the time we started talking again in April, all the way through May, the pattern continued. He kept pressuring me about lawyers, settlements, credit cards, cash advances, and more loans. He told me we were about to liquidate $28,000, starting with cash advances. He asked if I knew how to take money off of my credit cards using PayPal. Then he told me to take out $6,000 and put it into his account and say it was for move in, deposit, and furniture. I wasn't moving back to Washington at that time. I had been staying back and forth between my parents' house and my best friend's house, so I asked what the $6,000 was actually for. His answer was all money is for saving current and future expenses. But at the same time, he wasn't taking care of any of my expenses. I was watching him spend money freely. So I told him I was not comfortable with transferring all this money to him, especially when we're not even in a good place or have a plan on moving back. We hadn't even seen each other like he said we were going to. And his response was, I understand. You have the right to be uncomfortable, but you still have to do what your husband says. That sentence right there is everything. It shows that my feelings did not matter. My reality did not matter. What I had just been through did not matter. I was still expected to comply. So I tried to reason with him, and he doubled down. Check your feelings and do what your husband says. So now it was not just my money, it was my credit again. And when I told him I was concerned about my credit, he asked me, what do you need your credit for? And I was confused because what do you mean, what do I need my credit for? My credit was important when he wanted me to put a car in my name. It was important when he wanted me to open loans and credit cards. Either way, I needed my credit for my future. Then, after pushing me, pressuring me, and telling me what to do, he flipped again. Now it was save your money, pay your bills, be smart. I'm going to talk to you in a few weeks. And just like that, my number was blocked for weeks. I was carrying his child, had no money, and was staying wherever I could for free. That back and forth is what kept me stuck. Control, then distance, pressure, then detachment, demands, then be smart. Nothing was consistent. The rules changed depending on what he wanted in that moment. We stopped talking from May 21st all the way to July 2nd. No contact, nothing. I was having the best times I had throughout my pregnancy during that time. Spending time with my family, my best friend and her kids, no stress, no constant arguments, no daily pressures, walks on the beach, tours downtown, aquarium visits, coffee dates, rooftop movies, just the best time. And the only reason Deacon reached back out was because of my credit card again. The same card I added him to as an authorized user back in October of 2023 to help build his credit. Now my balance was going up because I was surviving off of it. And he reached out not to check on me, not to check on the baby, but to tell Captain Tazama to tell me to take him off of the card. I was really irritated because this man blocked my number weeks ago. And now he's telling someone else to talk to me for him about this. So I called him to see what the problem was. And that's how we started talking again. And when we did, it went right back into the same cycle. First, he told me that being an authorized user on my credit card was hurting his credit because my balances were going up, and my response was simple. If I had my settlement money, I wouldn't need to be using my credit cards to survive or prepare for a baby. He turned it around into if I would just do what he says, then the bills would be paid. I didn't want to go back and forth, so I just went ahead and called the bank and removed him. When I let him know it was done, the conversation turned into me having three more options to move forward: stay blocked, no communication, no bill of divorce, work on doing everything he says, plan to move back to Washington and have his baby and his wife in his city, or we can work on a co parenting situation where he would come down and visit once a month. I needed time to think about it because I couldn't just say I wanted to move back. I wasn't ready for that, and I didn't know if I would ever be ready for that. He told me to take my time, meditate, and seek counsel. But less than 8 hours later, at 2 in the morning, he texted me telling me that if I needed that long to decide, then he was making the decision for us. It was his way of pulling me in and then pushing me away once I started to get emotionally invested. I told him I was going to reach out to him the next day because after thinking about things, I still had some concerns. So we talked again the next day. I let him know about my reservations, talked about being afraid to go back to him, worried about our baby and my doctor's appointments, and how my family would feel if I were to go back. He said that all I needed to worry about was doing what he says, that everything will be fine if I just do exactly what he says, that if I wanted to reconcile the marriage and have him involved with our child, that going back to Washington was pretty much my only option other than a co parenting situation where he would come visit once a month once the baby is born. I didn't understand how that took care of every concern that I mentioned, but I also felt torn about reconciling with him. So I agreed to reconcile, and the plan was to move back to Washington eventually. He wanted it to be before the baby, but at that point, I had already been 25 weeks pregnant. I had just gotten comfortable with my midwife and connected with my doula, so I really wanted to take it day by day. That's what we did. We started talking about the baby, possible names, showing him ultrasounds and sending him pictures of myself and how much I had changed. Things were okay for a few days. Then the Feast of First Fruits came. He had skipped a mandatory trip to Atlanta with Sakari, then last minute decided to go because people were upset with him. He booked a red eye flight, and on his way there, he told me to use my credit card to pay for his hotel. And I want people to really think about this exchange. He tells me, whatever your max is, $30 a night. It can have roaches and an air mattress. I don't care. And I remember thinking, if you're perfectly comfortable staying somewhere like that, then why aren't you paying for it yourself? That was the part that never made sense to me. I was watching him spend money on jewelry, clothes, nights out, and other things for himself without hesitation. But when it came time to pay for something with my money or my credit, suddenly the standard dropped to the absolute bare minimum. Looking back, that's how it felt to me over and over again. It wasn't about whether the expense was reasonable. It felt like the priority was simply that he didn't have to be the one paying for it. He was willing to accept less as long as someone else was footing the bill. And that wasn't just about a hotel room. It became a pattern I felt in so many different areas of our relationship. That's why this exchange has always stuck with me. It wasn't really about a $30 hotel. It was about what it seemed to reveal. And this was happening while I was pregnant. Then came the Atlanta shopping situation. He told me he was needing $400 from someone who loved him so he could go get some clothes. I made a joke saying that he should get me something. He said it was going to be fake designer, but that it's where he bought all his clothes from. He said he would bring it to me when he came to visit me. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is him trying because he's never bought me anything before. Maybe this is effort, but then it became another request for money. Instead of $400, he wanted me to send $600. More pressure, more urgency. So I took a cash advance off my credit card and sent it to him like he was demanding. And then what happened? Suddenly, when it came time for him to buy something for me, the store was closed. Not just that day, but the next day too. And his flight was leaving, so there was no time. No purchase, no gift, no follow through, but he kept the money. That was the cycle. Promise, pressure, payment, excuse after excuse, nothing in return. Right after that, he had me use my credit card again to fund another trip for him to finally come see me in California. And I did it. I need to be honest about that. I did it because I was still trying to make things work. I was still thinking about my daughter. I was still holding on to the idea that if I just cooperated, if I just stayed in alignment, if I just did things right, maybe things would stabilize. But they didn't stabilize. And he would literally say things like, if worse comes to worse, you'll just have to file bankruptcy. Like that was normal. Like destroying my financial future while I was pregnant was just part of his plan. But the money wasn't the only thing he was taking from me during that time. The Feast of First Fruits was in July of 2024, and everything with Sakari started falling apart. There were issues happening within the camp. Hassad had been removed, and shortly after that, Deacon left as well. Together, they started a new camp called Genesis, and because I had always been the person designing things for him, suddenly I became responsible for helping build that new brand too. I designed the Genesis logo. I redesigned flyers, I updated social media graphics, I created new advertisements, I built a new website, I set up a new email address, I designed shirts, I designed hats, I helped create materials they could hand out at camp, all while pregnant, all while dealing with everything else that was already happening. Looking back now, that's another piece people don't see because while I was being told there wasn't money for me, there somehow always seemed to be money for projects. There was always another flyer, another design, another idea, another thing that needed to be built, and I was expected to help make it happen. At the same time, toward the end of July, he told me his washer and dryer had broken. And once again, somehow that became my responsibility too. He had me purchase a washer and dryer for his house using my credit card. Still pregnant, still not working, still trying to figure out how I was going to provide for myself and my baby. And I was furnishing his house while still not having any real financial security of my own. At the same time all of this was happening, I had been staying primarily at my best friend's house. She had become one of my biggest sources of support throughout my pregnancy. I still had my room at my parents' house, but I had practically moved into her spare bedroom. I bought a bed, got everything set up, and made it comfortable for me and the baby. At the time, Captain Tazama wasn't living there, but towards the end of July, he moved back in. Now, by this point, there was already tension between Deacon and Captain because of everything happening between Sakari and Genesis. They still spoke occasionally, but one night Deacon called Captain. I was downstairs when it happened, and I couldn't make out exactly what was being said, but I could hear yelling. A few moments later, my phone rang, and it was Deacon. He told me he had called Captain to vent and that the conversation had gone badly. According to him, Captain called him a faggot, and so he hung up and he blocked Captain and he decided he wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Then he told me something that put me in an impossible position. He said he didn't want me around Captain. He didn't want me around anyone associated with Sakari. He didn't want his baby in that house. He told me I needed to leave immediately. And I remember feeling completely conflicted because, on one hand, I was constantly being taught to do what my husband said. But on the other hand, this was my best friend's house. She had been there for me through my entire pregnancy. She had supported me when he wasn't there. She had opened her home to me. None of this conflict had anything to do with us. But now I was being told to uproot myself again at 32 weeks pregnant. And honestly, my friend was furious. She had watched him take money from me. She had watched him make promises he didn't keep. She had watched me support him financially throughout the pregnancy. And now, after all of that, he wanted me gone immediately. No plan, no movers, no assistance, no concern for the fact that I was 8 months pregnant. Just leave. But I tried to look at it practically because by that point, I wasn't just thinking about myself anymore. I was thinking about my daughter. Realistically, I wasn't going to be taking a newborn back and forth between hotels for visitation. I needed stability. I needed somewhere safe. I needed somewhere practical. So I talked to my parents. They understood that despite everything, I was still trying to make sure my daughter had a relationship with her father. They agreed that if he came to California after the birth, he could stay at their house and spend time with the baby there. So that's where I went. I still visited my best friend whenever Captain wasn't around, but my focus had shifted. At that point, I was preparing to become a mother. As September approached, we started discussing the birth. And despite everything, he was still pressuring me to move back to Washington. Thankfully, by that point, I was too far along in my pregnancy for any new midwife or provider to realistically take over my care. I remember him telling me I could just walk into an emergency room and have the baby. And I remember being completely thrown off by that. This was my first child. I had spent months building trust with my providers. My midwives knew me. My doula knew me. I had a birth plan. I had support. The idea of moving to another state and walking into a random hospital to give birth to my first child without my support system felt terrifying. So I tried to compromise. I told him I would stay in California for the birth, and after our daughter was born and cleared to travel, we could revisit the conversation about moving. Eventually, he agreed. He told my midwife he would attend the birth preparation classes. He agreed to meet with the doula. We scheduled appointments to discuss labor, delivery, and the role he would play when our daughter arrived, and then he didn't show up. I was disappointed, but I still wanted to believe he would be there when it mattered most. I still wanted to believe that when our daughter arrived, things would be different. Even after everything, I was still moving in good faith. I was still making room for him to show up. I was still hoping that when our daughter arrived, he would choose to be the father I wanted her to have. And to his credit, when the time finally came, he did get on a plane. He did make the trip. He did come to California for the birth of our daughter. What happened after that is a story all by itself.